Thank you for joining this professional development video provided by the Office of Early Childhood at the Nebraska Department of Education. This presentation, The How, What, and Why of Intentional Teaching, has 3 parts that will focus on strategies for adults to enhance children's learning during play. During Part 1, we discussed the importance of the physical environment and how to effectively arrange the classroom, as well as some basic adult interaction strategies that should be used to support children's play. Part 3 will focus on adult strategies to use to support higher level thinking in young children as they play. This part, which is Part 2, will discuss the materials that can be used in each specific area of the learning activities subscale in ECHRS 3, with an emphasis on those materials needed to score at the higher level on the ECHRS 3 observation. The ECHRS 3 book will guide you as we discuss materials. The National Center on Quality Teaching and Learning has established some guidelines for materials in an early childhood environment. By asking ourselves a few questions, we can determine how appropriate the materials are. Do the materials engage children in learning? Do the materials support social interactions between children? Do the materials promote independence of children through their use? Let's consider how these guidelines might look in practice. All materials in a classroom should engage children in learning. The purpose of the materials should always be linked to learning. The Nebraska Early Learning Guidelines, also known as Nebraska's ELGs, provide standards for pre-K classrooms. The ELGs are divided into domains: social and emotional development, approaches to learning, health and physical development, language and literacy development, mathematics, science, and creative arts. Young children learn through a holistic manner which involves all their senses. The ELGs can provide support for determining appropriate expectations for young children, as well as providing suggestions for materials to use. Meaningful materials are ones which connect with a child's life and allow them to act out roles such as construction worker or chef. Culturally appropriate materials will take into consideration all the children within a classroom and help them see themselves within that classroom. And attractive materials will spark children's interests and draw children into using the materials. Teachers sometimes notice that some materials are not used very often. In that case, a quick assessment can help teachers determine why a material is not used by children. Teachers should ask, is this material linked to learning, meaningful, attractive, or culturally appropriate? If the answer is no to any of these questions, the teacher can consider other more appropriate materials to include in the classroom. Or the teacher can consider how that material could be made more meaningful. Sometimes children do not use materials because they are unaware of what can be done with these materials. A small group lesson that uses the materials can spark children's interests and result in the materials being used more often. At the heart of an early childhood classroom is the social interactions between children. Materials support children as they work together and practice using social skills such as taking turns, sharing, and having social conversations. Common interests and experiences can draw children together to work on a project. Knowing the home background of the children can help with placing materials in your room. Children from a rural area may be drawn to materials that relate to farming and ranching, while children from a larger city may not be as interested in those materials. This allows the teacher to provide the necessary support either in adding additional materials to the rural classroom or introducing the children in the city classroom to the barn and farm animals through a variety of activities such as books, role-playing, and songs. Materials should be based upon learning goals for children. These goals can include language skills, math concepts, social, or fine motor skills. All materials should have a purpose rather than just being cute. The range in abilities in children require a wide variety of materials to be available. For example, some children are just discovering puzzles and may even need knobs on the pieces to help with fine motor skills. Other children may be able to put together a multiple-piece floor puzzle, while still other children will need something in between. Open-ended materials are a great way to meet the abilities of each child, as they can be used in a variety of ways. Many art materials are considered open-ended, but other materials like blocks, natural items, dress-up clothes, and sand are also open-ended materials. A common goal among early childhood teachers is to promote independence in 3- and 4-year-olds. Materials are one of the main ways to promote independence. As children become more independent, they become more confident in their own abilities and are more comfortable within the learning environment. A great advantage of having materials that children can use independently is that the teacher is able to interact with more children rather than spending time getting out materials for children to use. Ordered materials allow children to use materials independently. Labeled materials provide the basis for ordered materials. As many young children don't yet read, a label must always include a visual. Visuals can include a photo, drawn picture, actual object, or a picture from a catalog. Combining print with a visual helps children make the connection between spoken and written words. It also provides teachers with an opportunity to point out letters and words to children throughout the day. Common materials should be grouped together, and teacher materials should be separate from children materials. While some materials should stay in the room throughout the year, such as blocks, paint, and dolls, other materials can be rotated in to keep interest alive. During the fall, there may be firefighter materials, including dress-up clothes, puzzles, and fire trucks in the room. While in the spring, materials might focus on insects. There is a need to balance rotating materials with familiar materials, as children find comfort in consistency. The importance of sufficient materials can't be overstated. Young children are egocentric. They are focused on themselves, and when there are not enough materials to go around, problems will arise. This doesn't mean that every child must have their own baby doll or tractor, but that there must be enough materials to interest all children. Common sense can help in determining how many of a certain type of material is enough. When a material has to be of a limited number, such as the sand table, teachers can support independence by having a method for taking turns. A list of children waiting to use the sand table or a timer are options that can be used. Please note that a timer should be used to help children learn to manage their time, but not used to dictate when it is time to leave if it causes children undue distress. Sufficient materials also means that there are enough sets of toys such as building materials. If the classroom has lots of different building materials, but not enough of any one kind of material to build, children are less likely to engage with these materials. Finally, materials should be durable and easy to clean. These overall guidelines for materials will help in determining what to place in the interest centers or play areas throughout the classroom. Now, let's look at what materials are needed in the interest centers according to the subscale learning activities. During Part 1, the difference between interest centers and play areas was discussed. Please refer to Part 1 for questions about the differences, and remember that a classroom must have 5 interest centers to score at the 5 level in ECHRS 3. All interest centers must follow these guidelines. They must have a convenient, comfortable place to use materials. This can be a table and chairs or a rug. All materials should be labeled and stored with easy access. Low shelves that children can reach and lids which are easily opened. The labels should have pictures and may have print. Labels on both the container and shelf or storage area provide support for easy cleanup and promote independence. Interest centers should focus on one type of play. Materials in the interest center must be available for 1 hour of play during each 3-hour time period. If playtime is less than 1 hour, credit for interest centers may not be given. Let's delve into the specifics of what ECHRS 3 requires for materials in interest centers. The examples in the next slides are just examples and are meant to help you begin to think about possible materials to use in your classroom. There are many possibilities of materials that are not listed during this video. Please remember that these are guidelines for materials, and while some interest centers have requirements, it is not expected that every classroom will have the exact same materials. A book interest center requires a comfortable place for children to enjoy books that are age appropriate. The books should be from a variety of genres, including fantasy and factual, as well as for different abilities. Open shelves allow for easy access to promote independence. While a few books might have worn pages, especially those favorite books, most books should be in good shape and in one piece. In general, a classroom with 20 children should have at least 35 books. A place to read the books is necessary and should allow children to be comfortable while reading. Child-sized couches and chairs, beanbags, and large pillows are possibilities. Please note that Eckers 3 requires a cozy area, and while the book and cozy area can be the same place, only the cozy area will be counted when scoring for the number of interest centers in the classroom. Sometimes teachers are tempted to put the book area with a literacy area. Remember that the definition of an interest center requires that only materials for that type of play should be included in the interest center. If materials for literacy, such as writing utensils, paper, word cards, and alphabet games, are placed with the books, it may no longer be considered an interest center, but rather a play area. The dramatic play area is generally one of the staples of an early childhood program. This is the area where children are able to act out roles such as chef, mom, dad, princess, or superhero. Basic housekeeping materials should always be present, including a kitchen set such as a stove, refrigerator, or sink. Dishes, plates, pretend food, and utensils promote imagination. Remember to consider boys and girls in the dress-up clothes choices. Consider if you include princess clothes, what will the boys wear? Garage sales are a great resource for dress-up clothes, shoes, and props. Additional themes can be present in the dramatic play area. Daily life props should always be present, with the additional themes coming from community workers, such as doctor's office or a restaurant, from fantasy, such as superhero or princesses, or from leisure, such as sports or camping. Props and accessories can include shoes, hats, purses and bags, doctor instruments, restaurant menus, instruction manuals, etc., etc. The possibilities are endless. Baby dolls with props such as bottles, blankets, clothing, and furniture should also be included. There should be plenty of materials to engage children without overwhelming them. As with all other interest centers, it is important to remember what type of play is happening in the block area. The focus of the block area should be constructing. Oftentimes, the play in the block area is dramatic, as children play with cars and tractors or dollhouses. A block play area can support different types of play and can include blocks, Legos, a dollhouse, and vehicles. But this area cannot be considered an interest center because construction is not the main type of play. In order for a block play area to become an interest center, the focus must be kept on constructing with unit blocks. Unit blocks can be made from wood, foam, or plastic. They are at least 2 inches by 2 inches, and they relate to each other. So, 2 square unit blocks may be the same size as 1 rectangle block. Accessories such as small people, vehicles, animals, and other supporting materials like road signs or fences should enhance the building and not become the main focus. Adults can provide support to children by commenting or asking specific questions about the building process in order to redirect attention to building. Some types of play may require more space than others, and block building is one of them. The block interest center should be located where building can take place without interference from traffic. A large rug can muffle the sound of blocks on the floor. There should be enough unit blocks and space for 3 children to build 3 fairly large structures. Consider carefully how many unit blocks are available for each child to use. A starter set does not generally have enough blocks for 3 children to build large structures. Large hollow blocks can also be used for building. They should be labeled and stored on a shelf or in tubs in a large space that supports construction. The Science and Nature Interest Center has specific guidelines for materials and must have a dedicated place for children to use the materials. A table and a few chairs are sufficient for exploration. 15 materials must come from the 5 categories, including living things, natural objects, factual books or games, tools, and sand or water. While generally all materials should be in the same area in order to count as an interest center, an exception is made for the sand or water table. The sand or water table may be separate from all the other science and nature materials, or it may be outside. But remember that all materials must be accessible to children for 1 hour during the 3-hour observation in order to be counted as an interest center. Only water or sand should be used. Credit will not be given for other materials such as kinetic sand or food such as corn. There should be enough water or sand that children can pour and explore with several types of toys such as measuring cups, scoops, or bowls. All remaining materials must be in the same location and they must include living plants, such as plants or classroom animals. Remember that all plants and animals should be considered safe for children. This can be checked out in the book Caring for Our Children, which is listed on the resource slide. Natural objects such as rocks, seashells, real leaves, sticks, pine cones, bird nests. Anything found in nature as long as children can touch them. Factual books and nature and science picture games. Books should be nonfiction and deal with a science topic such as insects, weather, or life cycles. And picture games can include match-up games, puzzles with a matching base, or a nature or science-themed board game. Tools include items such as magnets, thermometers, magnifying glass, microscopes, smelling or sound jars, a kaleidoscope, magnetiles, or even a light table. Tools require materials, such as a tweezer must have some materials to explore. Math tools such as a ruler or balance scale are sometimes seen in a science and nature center. They must have materials that complement the exploration of nature or science materials. So, if a balance scale is included, it must be obvious what materials such as pumpkins or rocks would be used with it. A fine motor interest center can be set up specifically, or the fine motor materials can be found throughout the room. It is also possible to have interest centers with just a specific type of fine motor materials. For example, a puzzle interest center or an interest center set up with a Lego table. Fine motor materials throughout the room should include at least a total of 10 different choices from these 4 categories, with at least one example from each category. Interlocking building materials, manipulatives, puzzles, and art materials. Examples of interlocking building materials include Legos, Duplos, or bristle blocks. Manipulatives include stringing beads, pegboards with pegs, geoboards, smaller tabletop blocks, or gears. Puzzles can be any type of puzzle including floor, wooden, block, or knobbed puzzles. Art materials can include items from the Art Interest Center or play area and are discussed on the next slide. The Art Interest Center must have at least one material from each of these 5 categories: drawing materials with paper, paints, 3-dimensional objects, collage materials, and tools. These materials must be out and ready for children to use. If the Play-Doh or paint is in a cupboard and the teacher must get it out, this is not considered accessible to children. Drawing materials can include paper with crayons, markers, pencils, or chalk. Paints may include tempera, watercolors, or finger paints. Three-dimensional objects should be accessible and are items such as Play-Doh, clay, or boxes of various sizes. Collage materials are those used to make art projects and include yarn, ribbon, sequins, or foam shapes. And tools used in the art area include scissors, tape, hole punches, paintbrushes, stamps and pads, and stencils. We know that some families may not have ample food in their homes, and with that consideration in mind, food such as pasta, rice, or corn should not be used as a material in an early childhood classroom and will not be counted during an ECHRS 3 observation. A music interest center is one that is set up specifically for musical exploration, and so it should have ample space for children to move as they make music. A variety of at least 10 musical instruments should be available for children to use. So you might have several jingle bells, a triangle, some maracas, a drum, and some sand blocks, adding up to 10 instruments. However, if there are 10 of the same instrument, such as 10 jingle bells, this would only be counted as one instrument. A CD player can be counted as a musical instrument as well. Regardless of whether there is a math interest center, there should be a variety of math materials in the classroom. There should be at least 10 math materials with at least 3 materials from each of these categories: counting and comparing quantities, measuring and comparing sizes and parts of a whole, and familiarity with shapes. Examples of counting and comparing quantities include materials such as Unifix cubes with number trays, small objects to count into filled containers, games to figure out more or less, dominoes, any game with the dice, or stringing beads with pattern cards. Examples of measuring and comparing materials include measuring cups and spoons with materials to measure, such as sand or water, a balance scale with things to weigh, rulers, yardsticks, and tape measures with things to measure, puzzles with geometric shapes to put together, and fraction games. Materials that relate to familiarity with shapes are items such as a shape sorter, shape puzzle, geoboards, attribute blocks, pattern blocks, and shape stencils. Beyond these math materials, the classroom should also have a variety of materials with printed numbers on them. These materials could include matchup puzzles with the printed number on one side and corresponding number of objects on the other, simple number card games, board games that count objects and match to printed numbers, and materials that connect the printed number with objects should be displayed around the room, such as a poster with numbers and matching objects. Play materials with printed numbers should also be found in the classroom. This could include telephones, numbers on the house area microwave, a play cash register, or a calculator. ECHRS 3 provides guidelines for improving early childhood programs. As you look carefully at your program in relation to ECHRS 3, you can determine how you provide a quality early childhood experience to children. While setting up your classroom and selecting materials for children to use, follow these guidelines. Interest centers focus on one type of play. Play areas may focus on several types of play. Materials should engage children, promote independence, and support social interactions. And play areas or interest centers should have a place to use and store materials. This concludes part 2 of the how, what, and why of intentional teaching. Think about your own classroom and ask yourself, what interest centers do I have in my classroom? What play areas do I have in my classroom? What enhancements could I make to the interest centers or the play areas? What materials do children seem to enjoy? What materials rarely get used? How can I provide support for children to use these materials? What materials would I like to add to my classroom? Are these materials open-ended, found items, or purchased items? How can I add these materials to my classroom? How would these materials enhance children's learning? Are materials easily accessible? Are materials labeled? What can I do to improve the accessibility of and promote independence in children as they use the materials? As you work to enhance the quality of your early childhood classroom, here are some resources that may help with materials and setting up interest centers and play areas in your classroom. Thank you for your time and attention, and thank you for the work you do to provide a quality early childhood experience for the children in your program.